The galaxy was on the brink of collapse. For centuries, the war between the human-led Confederation and the coalition of alien species had raged, sweeping through star systems and tearing entire civilizations apart. What had once been a prosperous human empire, filled with vast colonies and thriving trade routes, was now a fractured remnant. The Confederation's military forces, battered and broken, struggled to hold what little territory they had left. Their enemies were endless, alien fleets from every corner of the galaxy, each determined to wipe humanity from existence. With each passing year, the Confederation's strength diminished, and their once proud fleets were decimated in space battles that seemed to last forever. The war had taken its toll on every person who fought and every planet they called home. Supplies were scarce, morale was low, and hope seemed like a distant memory. The Confederation's allies, once numerous, had all but disappeared, either overrun by the alien forces or too weak to continue the fight. In the endless void of space, humanity was fighting a losing battle on every front. There were no more reinforcements, no more strategies left to try. It was as though the Confederation was slowly but surely being erased from the galaxy, piece by piece. But even in this darkness, there remained a spark. One final hope that could turn the tide and end the war. Deep within the heart of the Confederation's military command, a secret project had been underway for years. Engineers, scientists, and strategists had worked in the shadows to develop a weapon so powerful, so devastating, that it could obliterate entire fleets in the blink of an eye. It was a weapon unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, a last-ditch attempt to bring an end to the war. But there was a catch, a dark and costly one. The weapon required one person to make an ultimate sacrifice. It was designed to be operated by a single pilot, someone who would be willing to launch it directly into the heart of the enemy's strongest fleet. The ship that housed the weapon was a marvel of technology, a sleek, advanced warship capable of withstanding the harshest of space battles. But once the weapon was deployed, there would be no way to survive. It was a one-way mission. The person who volunteered would be a hero if they succeeded. If they failed, they would be forgotten. The Confederation's leaders, desperate to save what remained of humanity, knew that this was their final chance. It was a decision that could save billions of lives or doom them all. And so, the call went out. A volunteer was needed. Someone brave enough, someone willing to sacrifice everything for the greater good. But no one could have anticipated who would step forward. Captain Elena Carter, a seasoned officer with a reputation for both her brilliance and her willingness to do the impossible, stood before the War Council. Her face, worn from years of conflict, showed no fear, only determination. She knew that this mission was the only chance left to end the war. She knew the risks, knew the pain, and yet she volunteered without hesitation. It was the hardest decision she'd ever made, but in her heart, she knew there was no other way. She could not let her people suffer any longer. The weapon, the hope for peace, would only work if she was the one to deliver it. As she prepared for the mission, she thought of the families that had already lost everything, of the worlds that had been destroyed, and of the soldiers who had fought and died without seeing any end to the bloodshed. And yet, even as the weight of the sacrifice pressed down on her, a small part of her hoped that this final, desperate measure would be enough to turn the tide. The galaxy had suffered for too long. This time, it would be humanity that decided the war's outcome. But the question remained. Was it truly the right choice? Was ending the war worth the cost of one life? For Elena Carter, there was no other choice. The mission was set. The weapon was ready. The fate of the galaxy rested on the shoulders of one individual, and she was prepared to make that sacrifice. The final battle was about to begin. Captain Elena Carter had always been the type to lead from the front. Her reputation in the Confederate Navy was built on a legacy of brilliance and strategy, unmatched loyalty to her people, and a courage that inspired even the most battle-hardened soldiers. Through countless battles, she had risen above the chaos of war, proving time and time again that she was not just a leader but a symbol of hope for humanity. But now, as the war reached its most desperate stage, even Elena felt the weight of the impossible decision before her. The call for a volunteer to pilot the Confederation's final secret weapon had gone out, and for some reason, all eyes turned to her. She had heard whispers of the weapon, a prototype ship unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, capable of wiping out entire fleets with a single strike. It was the Confederation's last hope, a weapon designed to deliver a devastating payload that could obliterate the alien forces once and for all. However, there was one terrifying truth no one could escape. The weapon was a one-way mission. The ship, despite its destructive power, had no escape mechanism. Once deployed, it would be destroyed in the process. There would be no coming back. No second chances, just the end. The thought hung in the air like a heavy fog, and as Elena stood before the War Council, her heart pounded in her chest. The decision, she knew, would not just affect her, it would affect everyone. The fate of humanity rested in her hands. There was a brief moment of silence, the room filled with the gaze of those who had seen endless years of destruction and loss. Yet, in that moment, Elena found clarity. She had always understood the cost of war, the sacrifices that had already been made by so many. Her own soul had been etched with grief, having lost friends, family, and entire worlds in the conflict. She knew what was at stake. If this weapon could end the war, then it was worth any cost. But that didn't make the decision any easier. As the room waited for her answer, Elena felt her mind racing through every possible outcome, every possible future. She could feel the eyes of the council, the eyes of humanity, weighing on her. She was their last hope, and in a way, they were also hers. She had always believed that a true leader was one who could make the hardest decisions when the time came. And now, the time had come. Elena's voice broke the silence, steady and calm despite the turmoil inside her. "I'll do it," she said, the words leaving her lips before she could second-guess them. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. There was no turning away now. Her decision would be etched in history, either as the one who saved humanity or as the one who failed them. The weight of the moment settled in her chest as she turned to leave the room. As she walked out of the command center, Elena didn't feel the relief of a decision made. Instead, she felt the cold grip of reality. She knew the dangers, understood the sacrifice that was required. But the thought of her people, of every soldier, every family, every civilian who had suffered, because of this endless war, pushed her forward. The weapon wasn't just a tool of destruction. It was the symbol of everything they had fought for, everything they had lost. She had always believed in the strength of humanity, in the belief that they could overcome any obstacle. And now, with the weight of this final mission on her shoulders, Elena was determined to see it through. As she prepared to step into the cockpit of the massive ship, she couldn't help but wonder if this would be the end of the war, or the end of her. But one thing was certain. She was going to give everything for this final, desperate attempt, at peace. The countdown to her final mission had begun, and there was no turning back. The war, at long last, would end, at a cost no one had ever dared to imagine. The cold metal of the ship's corridors seemed to echo with the weight of what was to come. Captain Elena Carter's boots clicked steadily against the floor as she walked through the dimly lit hallways of the massive prototype vessel, the Cerberus. Her mind was racing, but her steps were steady. Every corner of the ship, every sound, seemed to remind her of the enormity of the mission ahead. The final battle was near. The alien coalition, an alliance of ruthless species from across the galaxy, had launched a full-scale assault on Earth's last line of defense. The Confederation's leaders had already lost hope of holding back the invaders. Their final hope lay in Elena's hands. The Cerberus was humanity's last weapon, a ship designed to deliver a single, devastating strike against the heart of the enemy fleet. A weapon so powerful that it could change the tide of the war in one instant. But it came with a price. The ship's weapon was designed to be activated by a single person, and it would be a one-way mission. Once she deployed it, there would be no turning back. Elena had already made that decision, but the closer she came to carrying out the mission, the more the gravity of her choice settled in her chest. Every step felt heavier. As she walked toward the command center, memories flooded her mind. She thought of the battles she'd fought in, of the comrades who had fought and died alongside her. She remembered the faces of the civilians whose homes had been destroyed, the families who would never see their loved ones again. It was for them that she had volunteered. It was for them that she had chosen to sacrifice herself. The corridors around her seemed to close in, the weight of 1,000 souls pressing down on her shoulders. She could feel the eyes of her crew, the men and women who would follow her to the end, watching her as she passed. They all knew the stakes. They all understood the cost. But they also understood that there was no other choice. As Elena entered the command center, she saw her crew already preparing for the battle. Their faces were a mixture of determination and fear. They had been through so much already, but this would be their final test. She stood before them, her heart heavy, but her resolve unwavering. The time for words was short. The alien fleet was closing in on Earth, and every second mattered. "Listen up!" Elena's voice rang out, firm and clear. "This is it, the final stand. We hold them off as long as we can. The Cerberus is the last chance we have, but it won't matter if we don't buy enough time for the weapon to deploy." She paused, scanning the faces of her crew. There was no fear in their eyes, only the same fierce determination that had carried them through countless battles. "We fight until the end," she continued. "We give them everything we've got. And when the time comes, I'll do what I have to, but we need you to hold the line. Do you understand?" A chorus of affirmatives echoed through the room. Elena nodded, her chest tightening as she gave the final order. "Prepare for battle, and don't let them take a single inch. This is for Earth, this is for all of us." She turned and walked toward the cockpit, where she would carry out the mission that could end the war. But only at a cost no one could predict. The sound of alarms began to blare as the first waves of alien ships appeared on the scanners. The tension in the air was palpable. Time was running out, and the fate of humanity rested on the next few hours. Elena's crew took their positions, their hearts set on the grim task ahead. But they knew one thing for certain: they would give everything to buy her those precious moments. The battle had begun. The final battle for humanity's survival was underway, and as the first shots were fired, Elena Carter knew that there was no turning back. She was ready to carry out her mission, to make the ultimate sacrifice, but it was not only her life that hung in the balance. The future of her species, the future of the galaxy, was about to be decided. The countdown had started, and nothing could stop what was coming next. The battle raged around Elena Carter like a storm, fierce and unrelenting. Humanity's forces, battered and outnumbered, fought desperately to hold their ground against the alien coalition that had swept across the galaxy. Every blast from the enemy ships felt like a hammer strike against the fragile shield of the Confederation. But even as the chaos unfolded around her, Elena remained focused on her mission. The Cerberus moved through the war-torn space, its sleek form cutting through the debris of fallen starships, heading straight for the heart of the enemy's most powerful fleet. The alien forces had gathered in one place, a final stand that would determine the fate of everything. Elena knew that she was close, so close to finishing this, to bringing an end to the war that had torn the galaxy apart for so long. The weapon was ready, waiting to be deployed, and once she activated it, there would be no turning back. The moment she launched it, the enemy fleet would be obliterated, but so would she. The sacrifice would be complete. As she navigated through the battlefield, her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing the weight of the decision she had made. She could see the enemy ships growing larger on her screen, their dark silhouettes looming against the backdrop of distant stars. They were waiting for her, and she was waiting for the right moment. But with every passing second, the reality of what she was about to do hit her harder. She thought of the families who had already lost everything. She thought of the soldiers who had fought beside her, knowing that their sacrifices might never be fully recognized. She thought of the endless lives that had been lost in the wake of this war. And yet, she felt a flicker of pride too. Pride in her people, in humanity, who had stood against impossible odds for so long. The Confederation might have been battered, but it was still alive. It still had hope. That hope was now in her hands. The countdown on her console began, and Elena's hand hovered over the button that would unleash the weapon's full power. 10 seconds. The fate of the galaxy rested on her shoulders. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking in a slow breath, and allowed herself to feel everything: grief for the lost, pride for the living, and fear of what the future might hold. Would this end the war, or would it be the beginning of a new kind of destruction? The unknown gnawed at her, but there was no time for hesitation. Her finger moved to press the button, and that's when it happened. A sudden, sharp tone rang through the ship's communication system, followed by an unexpected transmission. Elena's heart skipped a beat. She quickly activated the receiver, her eyes narrowing with confusion as the voice came through. "Captain Carter, we need to talk." The voice was alien, but there was a tone of urgency in it, an unfamiliar desperation. "This weapon, the one you are about to deploy, it's not what you think it is." Elena's breath caught in her throat as the message continued. The voice explained that it was from a faction of the alien coalition, one that had grown disillusioned with the war. They revealed a truth Elena hadn't anticipated. The weapon was not only going to destroy the enemy fleet, its power would tear through the fabric of space itself, destabilizing entire sectors of the galaxy and possibly destroying everything in its path. The weapon had been engineered not just to kill, but to rewrite the balance of the galaxy, to wipe out more than just the alien forces. The devastation would affect humanity too. It was a hidden truth, one that had been kept from her and everyone else. The very thing she was about to use to save her people could bring about an even greater disaster. Elena's mind spun as the gravity of the revelation settled over her. She had been so focused on ending the war, on saving what was left of her people, that she hadn't questioned the true cost of the weapon. Now, the moment of her sacrifice seemed much more complicated. Could she go through with it? Could she unleash a weapon that might destroy everything they had fought for? Her hands trembled on the controls as the countdown continued, but the fear that gripped her was not just of death, it was of the unknown consequences. The mission she thought was a clear path to peace now felt like a terrible gamble, one that might tear apart the galaxy in its attempt to save it. She was no longer certain of what was right. Would the war truly end, or would her sacrifice lead to an even worse future? The seconds ticked away, and Elena was faced with a choice that no one should ever have to make. The cold, metallic hum of the Cerberus seemed deafening now, as if the ship itself was aware of the storm of uncertainty brewing in Elena Carter's mind. Her hand hovered over the button, ready to unleash a weapon that could end the war. But then, the transmission, a voice, trembling yet urgent, had shattered everything she thought she knew about her mission. It wasn't just an alien fleet that would be destroyed, but something far more dangerous. The weapon, she learned, was far from the savior she had been led to believe it was. The voice, belonging to an alien faction that opposed the war, revealed a chilling truth. The weapon was designed to do far more than obliterate the enemy. It was a tool of destruction that would trigger a chain reaction, one that could destabilize the very fabric of the galaxy itself. Elena's heart skipped a beat as the words sank in. The alien faction claimed that the weapon had been built by a group of humans who had grown disillusioned with their own species and the endless war they had fought for centuries. These humans, believing that the only way to save the galaxy was to destroy it all, had designed the weapon not just as a final strike against the enemy, but as a reset button for civilization itself. The war, in their eyes, was a means to an end, a way to tear down the corrupt empires, the alliances, and the entire structure of the galaxy, leaving only the ashes from which something new could rise. The revelation felt like a blow to the chest. Elena's mind raced, struggling to comprehend what she was hearing. These humans, how could they have thought that the destruction of everything was the only solution? And now, she was caught in the middle of it. She had been prepared to sacrifice herself, to save her people and end the war. But this new truth made her question everything. Was she about to unleash an even greater horror on the galaxy? Could she allow a weapon to destroy not only the alien fleet but everything else as well? The weight of the decision was unbearable. Her fingers trembled on the control panel, the countdown to destruction still ticking down. She thought of Earth, of the people she loved, of the soldiers who had fought so bravely. If the weapon worked as promised, it would obliterate the alien forces and secure humanity's survival. But the cost would be far greater. It could destroy planets, destabilize entire star systems, and perhaps leave nothing behind but a shattered, empty galaxy. And yet, the alien faction's message had come with its own heavy price. They were not simply warning her, they were begging her. This was their last attempt to stop the war, their final plea for peace. They had grown tired of the endless bloodshed and believed that if humanity could be saved from the path they had set, it could lead to a true end to the conflict. But could Elena trust them? The message was from those who had fought against the war, who wanted peace, but who were also on the losing side of an interstellar battle. Could their plea be sincere, or was it another manipulation in a galaxy filled with lies? And what would it mean for her people, for the Confederation, if she aborted the mission now? The future of humanity was at stake, but so was the future of the entire galaxy. Elena felt a deep, gut-wrenching sorrow as she thought about the price of this war, the countless lives lost, the planets turned to dust. And now, with this knowledge, she had to decide whether to follow through with the mission she had been given or turn away from it, risking everything. The cost of doing nothing was just as high as the cost of doing something. With a shaking breath, she made her decision. The weapon would be deployed only if there was no other choice. But now, Elena had to find out whether peace was still possible or whether the galaxy would truly be reset, destroyed for the sake of a new beginning. Time was running out, and with every passing second, the weight of the decision grew heavier. Would she end the war with a sacrifice, or would she prevent a catastrophe, risking everything humanity had worked for? The unknown hung in the balance, and Elena Carter was the only one who could tip the scales. Captain Elena Carter stood frozen, her eyes fixed on the countdown timer blinking steadily in front of her. The hum of the Cerberus felt deafening, the silence of her own thoughts filling her mind as the seconds ticked away. She had come so far, and now the weight of the galaxy was on her shoulders. The choice before her was as clear as it was impossible. The weapon was ready to be deployed. She could push the button and end the war, obliterate the enemy fleet, save Earth, save humanity. But the alien faction's desperate plea echoed in her mind, the horrifying truth that the weapon could destroy far more than just the alien forces. It could bring down entire star systems, destroy the balance of power across the galaxy, and leave nothing in its wake but a fragmented, broken civilization. She could sacrifice herself, as planned, and end the war. Her death would be a necessary price. But was it worth it? Could she live with herself knowing that her actions might destroy more than just the enemy? Elena's hands hovered over the controls, her thoughts a storm of conflicting emotions. Duty to her people, to Earth, to all of humanity fought against the moral compass that had always guided her decisions. She had always believed in fighting for a cause, in making the hard choices when no one else could. But this felt different. The truth about the weapon's effects had changed everything. It wasn't just a tool of war anymore. It was a weapon of mass destruction on an unimaginable scale. Her eyes flicked to the view screen, where the alien fleet was growing closer, its shadows spreading across the stars. The enemy was nearly upon them, and her crew waited for her decision. She could feel their eyes on her, their hopes and fears intertwined with her own. They trusted her to lead them, to make the right call, but the stakes had never been higher. Elena turned to face them, her crew members standing silently, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and determination. "Captain?" Lieutenant O'Neill's voice broke through the tension, his face pale but resolute. "We need to do this now. The fleet is almost within striking distance. We've held them off as long as we could, but if we don't act—" His voice trailed off, the unspoken truth hanging in the air. If they didn't act now, the war would be lost. The alien forces would overrun their defenses. Earth's last line of protection would be shattered. And then, it would be over. Elena nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the countdown. There was no time left for indecision. Yet, every fiber of her being screamed against the destruction she was about to unleash. The possibility of a peaceful resolution, of finding another way, haunted her. Could there still be hope for a diplomatic solution? Could she find a way to save both humanity and the galaxy? But deep down, she knew the answer. The war had already torn too much apart. The trust between the species was shattered. The opportunity, for peace, for a new future, felt like a distant dream. As the final seconds ticked away, Elena's heart heavy with the weight of what she was about to do, she made her choice. She wasn't just about to sacrifice herself for her people, she was about to sacrifice her very soul. The button could end the war, but it could also erase the future she had fought for. She could save humanity, but at what cost? The Cerberus would carry out its mission, and Elena would be the one to trigger the final strike. But as she prepared to do the unthinkable, a sense of dread filled her chest. She realized the true cost of peace would not just be her life, but the loss of her moral compass. She would forever carry the burden of having chosen destruction, knowing that the path she had walked led her to this moment, this final, terrible choice. There was no easy way out. There was no other option. She closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and then pressed the button. Time had run out. The weapon was deployed. The final sacrifice had been made. As Elena watched the countdown to her death, she couldn't help but wonder if, in the end, she had truly saved humanity, or if she had destroyed it forever. The moment Elena Carter pressed the button, the entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. The Cerberus shuddered as the weapon's full force activated, its devastating power unchained. In the depths of space, where the alien fleet had gathered, in a final attempt to crush humanity's last defenses, Elena knew she had made her choice. But what she didn't expect was the surge of defiance, the last flicker of hope that broke through the overwhelming certainty of her mission. As the weapon's countdown reached its final seconds, Elena's mind raced. This wasn't just about destroying the enemy fleet anymore. It was about something more. Something that could prevent this kind of war from ever reaching the far corners of the galaxy again. She couldn't let the cost of peace be so high that the galaxy would be doomed to repeat this endless cycle of destruction. Without hesitation, she altered the trajectory of the weapon's blast, redirecting its power. The weapon would still obliterate the enemy, but Elena was determined to ensure it did something more. It would create a massive galactic barrier. a boundary that would prevent any future war from spreading beyond certain sectors. The blast erupted with unimaginable force. The alien ships, once a powerful threat to Earth and its allies, disintegrated in an instant, their massive forms reduced to nothing more than scattered particles in the void. The Cerberus shook violently from the impact, the blast so powerful that it sent shockwaves through space itself. Yet the devastation didn't stop there. The energy from the weapon's release tore through the fabric of reality, distorting the very structure of space. Stars blinked out, entire systems were erased, and the once thriving civilizations that had dotted the galaxy were lost, swallowed by the expanding void. Elena had hoped to bring peace, but in the end, the cost was far greater than she had ever imagined. The galaxy, once a vast and interconnected network of civilizations, now lay fractured. The barrier she had created, while stopping the spread of war, had also isolated vast swathes of the galaxy, turning vibrant sectors into desolate, empty regions. The war had ended, but at what price? As the final remnants of the alien fleet dissolved into the cosmic void, Elena felt an overwhelming sense of loss. The mission was complete, but it was not the victory she had hoped for. She had ended the war, yes, but she had also irrevocably altered the very balance of the universe. The sacrifice she had made would be remembered for generations, but it would not be remembered as the triumph of humanity. No, it would be remembered as the price of peace, one that was higher than anyone had ever anticipated. In the aftermath, as the dust settled and the galaxy grappled with the consequences of Elena's actions, humanity was left with the daunting task of rebuilding. The Confederation, what remained of it, would have to pick up the pieces. They would have to learn to survive in a galaxy that had been irrevocably changed. But even as they began their rebuilding efforts, there was a sense of understanding that hung over them like a dark cloud. The cost of peace had been far greater than they had ever imagined. Humanity had given everything, not just in terms of lives, but in the very fabric of the galaxy itself. Elena Carter's name would go down in history as a symbol of sacrifice, of humanity's resilience, and its unyielding will to do whatever was necessary to ensure the survival of its people. But it would also be a stark reminder of the price that must sometimes be paid to secure a fragile peace. And as the stars blinked once again across the galaxy, there was an undeniable truth. This peace, hard-won though it was, had come at a cost that would be felt for generations to come. The galaxy would never be the same, and neither would humanity. But in the quiet aftermath, there was one thing that remained undiminished: the hope that, despite everything, they would rebuild. That was the legacy of Elena Carter, the woman who had sacrificed not just her life but her very soul for the hope of a better future.